That represent Main Street investors. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Thaddeus McCotter and Democratic Congressman Levin, both representing the state of Michigan. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us here on Fox Business. I know it's a tough day for your state. To both of you, Congressman Levin, do you support the president's assertion that it was this small group that took down the whole deal at Chrysler and forced them into bankruptcy?
Yes, I mean, that's the fact. It was a small band of people who said their self-interest was more important, and I think it was unenlightened self-interest. I don't see how they come out better. We should have avoided this, and they decided to gamble. But they're not only gambling with their own money, they're gambling with the national interest. The president was right on.
All right, Congressman, one of the things about this is that these people did come in with a fairly large checkbook to invest in Chrysler late in the game. The word is they paid about 30 cents on average for Chrysler debt. Are you going to, if you call them names, will they be there to invest in General Motors over the next month? Will you get people, financiers, to be afraid of Washington because of the backlash from the halls of Congress?
I don't think so. We're not calling them names. Look, you just said we don't know all the facts, that the people on the average had paid 30 cents and they were offered 33 cents. So why would they not accept the offer when the large bondholders said yes? It was really, I think, an unwise move. I think it was unenlightened. And that's not calling them names. It's calling a spade a spade.
Congressman McCotter, you know, you've been on Fox Business several times. You've been on the show several times. It's always great to talk to you. You know, let me ask you something here, though. The argument that we keep hearing from yesterday to today is that these funds that voted no, this 30%, they represent teachers' pension funds, the average Main Street investor, and they were only looking out was the best financial arrangement for their average Main Street investor. I know you've heard this before, but how do you respond?
Well, in many ways, I think part of the problem, if not the largest part of this problem, was the 30-day deadline to get this all done or face bankruptcy. This is what happens when you have a company the size of Chrysler with its all the intricacies and all the outstanding obligations trying to merge it with a fiat. You have loose ends like the hedge funds that come up, and within a finite period of time like 30 days, these types of things cannot be resolved before the arbitrary deadline. And so in many ways, it was the process that predetermined this outcome, and that's the problem. And now we are in bankruptcy, where, as you've rightly pointed out, this is the extension of the uncertainty that people have suffered here for months now.
Congressman McCotter, Chrysler has had at least about 4 near-death experiences since 1979, where taxpayers have been asked to help them out on numerous occasions. Do you agree that Oppenheimer funds and Zerian Capital, Stairway Capital, these are teachers and pensioners who have invested in these funds? Do you agree with the president's assertion that these are speculators? I mean, it seems to me that the bankruptcy law is not being upheld here, and that for political reasons it's being subverted. What do you say to that?
Well, in the end, it is the bankruptcy law that's going to wind up prevailing, because that's where the parties are now.
But are they speculators? Are teachers and pensioners speculators?
I think you could say that any investor is a speculator. But in the final analysis, I don't know whether or not they could have been brought on within a more responsible period of time. Yet the final analysis, Cheryl, is the big banks came on board, but then they ran out of time before they could work their way through all of these stakeholders.
But Congressman McCotter, these are TARP banks, though. You're talking about TARP versus non-TARP banks, and the argument has been since yesterday that they've got government funding behind them. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, they can afford to take the deal. These smaller groups could not.
But no, I'm not advocating, I'm not arguing that. But they also had stormed out of the room and not been particularly helpful in the initial stages of this. So they were not trying to be irresponsible. They, as Congressman Levin has pointed out, they decided that this was the best investment they could make over the period of time under this deal, as opposed to going into bankruptcy. The smaller investors obviously were next in line to go treat with.
Congressman Levin, can you respond?
Yes, when we read the statement from these people, they did not say that they ran out of time. They said they wanted essentially to gamble on a bankruptcy proceeding. They didn't say there wasn't enough time. And you mentioned the pension funds and education funds. We're not really sure whom they represented. All we know is that they decided, okay, they were offered cash, and they decided essentially to force Chrysler into bankruptcy. It wasn't really the process. It was their judgment in the end to gamble, and that what they're doing is gambling with Chrysler's future. And I think Chrysler's future, because of the agreement with Fiat, will survive, I think, a mistaken judgment, misjudgment by these bondholders.
Well,
very mistaken. Very mistaken.
Cheryl, if I can on that point, real quick. They ran out of time under a process that was arbitrary. They said that they would go into bankruptcy because that was the last choice. If you had a 25-day process, you wouldn't have had the big institutional banks on board in principle. It was 30 days to do the impossible. We almost pulled it off because of the people of Michigan, and now we are in bankruptcy at the end of an arbitrary.
Well, I don't blame the process. I blame these bondholders.
We know
they
that
made a mistaken judgment.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry, everybody. I've got breaking news, and I've got to get to it, everybody. But thank you so much to both congressmen for joining us from Michigan. We've got to get to some breaking news right now. We're getting new news from our partners over at the Wall Street